Hello and welcome back to the Dream Hub podcast. I'm Melissa, and today's episode is part of a special series leading up to the International Association for the Study of Dreams 2025 online conference. It's one of the most inspiring global gatherings on all things dreaming, from science to soul. And I'm joined today by Dr. Joshua Black, a grief and bereavement researcher, educator, and host of the Grief Dreams podcast. His work centers around a topic that so many of us experience but rarely talk about: dreams of people that we've lost. What they mean, how they support our healing, and why they're far more common and more powerful than people might think. He's one of the featured speakers at this year's IASD conference, and I'm really glad he's here with us to share a little glimpse of what he's been exploring. Joshua, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me.
I always love knowing the why behind people's work. So, could you tell us what drew you into this particular area of research? Like, was there a personal experience that made you pay attention to dreams in the context of grief, or did you just kind of fall into this?
No, I definitely had a personal experience because it wasn't something I had my eyes set on, where like some people are in school and they know exactly what they want to do and they sort of set their path. Like I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Like that's what my dream was. Well, I thought it was my dream. I think it was my father's dream, but that I internalized. And so what happened was I was in undergrad at the time and I was in my third year and my father died very unexpectedly. And it really shook my world. It was the first time I had someone that I cared about die. And with that came so much emotion and I'd say so much fear too, and regret and a lot of different things that, you don't really think about. And I was having a very difficult time. Like I remember getting the call and just like not being able to stop crying. And I don't know when the last time I cried was as a male in our culture. It was, probably when I was a kid at some time. And so I remember the tears just being so painful to me. And I just wanted it to all stop. And after the funeral, I got my wish because I wanted to go back to work. I wanted to go back to school. These are things that are pressing on my mind. And so what was interesting was I stopped crying, but when I went back out into the world, it was like black and gray. It didn't feel like the world I was living in prior. And I thought, oh, I guess this is just grief. Like there was just no color, nothing was, feeling any kind of joy. And I thought, okay, this is just grief. And I just was like that for like 3 months. I'm like, okay, it's just how it is, like you go to school, you get your grades, you're still doing your thing. And then I had a dream of my father, which I wasn't asking for. I didn't really even know you could have one. It wasn't something that was talked about. And I remember going to bed and having this dream where I see my dad at the end of the bed and he's looking really healthy, very loving and almost light. Like he had a lot of trauma in his life and he drank to cope. And so every time I saw him, he had this heaviness to him. But this was the first time he felt kind of light. And he was looking through some of my stuff and I walked up to him and I said, I'm going to miss you, acknowledging the loss. And I said that I loved him and we hugged and I woke up. And the crazy thing is, when I woke up, the color was back into my life. And it wasn't because I interpreted the dream. Like, this is the thing that I find most fascinating is just the dream itself changed me. And I still wonder how that's even possible and how it could be such a 180. And I was able to regulate my emotions again. And there was just a different, I guess, way I was processing the grief. But that changed me. And I started having dreams around every 3 months after that of being with him in some fashion or form. And I always had I still have a very, soft spot for the power of these dreams. But I didn't tell anyone, which is, I think, the craziest part of it all. I kept it hidden and people thought I was just resilient. I'm doing okay. But it was like it was this thing that like actually like saved me in a way. And then, as I said, I finished school and I was going to be the elementary school teacher. and I got into the program, or I got an interview to be in the program, and it just didn't feel right. And I just trust my intuition that this is not the path for me anymore. And I think because my dad had died and really wanted me to go that route, like that pressure wasn't there anymore. But I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And so in the meantime, I looked for volunteering opportunities, and there was one at a hospice, and they had a bereavement program. And so I did that. And when I was starting to support people one-on-one and also in group, they kept asking about these dreams that they had or haven't had. So some people are asking, why haven't I had the dream? And they're really complicating their grief with the answers they're providing. They're saying, oh, maybe they don't love me anymore, or maybe they're holding back their visit because they thought it was like a visitation or they wanted that. Other people were jealous that some of the family members were having dreams and they didn't understand what that meant. And then other people were wanting to know why they're having negative dreams of the deceased and what that represented within their grief. And other people just wanted to understand the frequency of like how common is this? And so it really like piqued my curiosity because I had my own, and like mine was you know very helpful, but I never really questioned what other people were having. Like it was just one of those moments where you're like, oh, I wonder. And so when I looked into the research, there wasn't really much there to give them and provide them the answers they're looking for. And then I had a thought, like, could I do this? Could I go back to school and answer some of these questions for them? And after I gained the courage to go back to school and then go this path, I've been, very grateful and honored to be able to be a part of two programs that allowed me to do research in this field, where it said like not many people were doing it. So my supervisors at the time didn't know much about it. They maybe they knew a little bit about dreams, they knew something about trauma, but this was so new. But they allowed me to come in and really like look at this from the ground up, which I have been so grateful for because it's allowing people to just gain more awareness on this topic and provide them some of the answers that they were seeking.
Wow, that's a huge, huge journey that you've been on to get you where you are, and I really am inspired by it. I love how personal it is, so that you're really passionately driven to doing this. So yeah, that makes me really curious to hear a little bit more about the presentation that you're doing this year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wanted to do a presentation that really encompasses all the work because one of the things when you're a student, you can't afford to go to these conferences and like travel and all that stuff. So I remember going to IASD conference in my first year of my master's, and I think that was the only time I've been. Um, and it's just been too expensive. And so I've always been doing this research. I've done, I think, 6 or 7 studies, published, the same amount of kind of articles, been doing, continue to do research in the area now. And so it's really, um, I would say I look back at all the work I've done and I want to sort of put it in a place where people who love dreams and who probably constantly hear about this topic will have a little bit more information on some of the research that's been going on, because as much as you publish, people don't always see it. There's usually a paywall behind it. And so these conferences can be really a great opportunity to showcase the work. And because I got so much time, it's going to be great to showcase all the different studies that I've been a part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really positive thing about this year with it being online, is it's so much more affordable for people. And even if you don't get to watch what you want to go and see, they'll be recorded and then you can watch back later. So it is really, really good value, I think, this year. And
Yeah. That's actually what brought me in, because like I said, I still can't, I'm not there yet to be able to afford like, 4 or 5 grand. But because it was online, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good opportunity for me to sort of share some of the research. So I am happy that it's on there because it is more accessible for people all over the world to be able to attend.
yeah, definitely. That's great. And so, like everyone who goes to IASD, uh, there's a huge range of different people, There's clinicians, researchers, dreamers, creatives, artists, spiritual explorers. So, like, what do you enjoy about presenting in that kind of an environment, or, getting to teach all different sorts of people?
Well, I think that the variety of people is amazing. So when I first went there, it was really great to just see so many different people and connecting with them, and they all had a passion for dreams, which you don't get at other conferences. So I've been to like a sleep conference, I've been to a grief conference, And their specialties are much different. And so what they value in your research is going to be much different. And a lot of times, a lot of the conferences are people who are researchers, usually the main thing. But this is a variety of people, which is really nice to sort of see that. And just sort of, and the questions you get are much different, which I like too. So I think it has like just, you're just talking to real people, and you're talking to researchers, and there's a lot of things that you can get through this. So I do like that aspect of it. And then I think I'm going to be able to explain grief in different ways to this community, where usually I'm at I'm presenting at a grief conference or something like that, where I'm educating on dreams, right? Like, and understanding dreams. But like for this, most people know the basics to dreams, but with grief, that's still something that's new for a lot of people to understand.
Mm. Yeah, it's great that you can cross-reference like that. And I'm the same. I love hearing all the different perspectives, like the way that an artist is going to deal with it versus a researcher and the perspectives that they have individually. It's like, oh, yeah, you get such a holistic view on dreams. I absolutely love it. So I did a bit of research, obviously, before getting you on the show. And one of your central ideas in your work is something called continuing bonds. Could you explain what that means in everyday terms? Because I think a lot of people are doing it instinctively without even realizing it.
Yeah, so a continuing bond is really anything you're doing to maintaining a connection with the deceased. So that could be thinking about them, maybe visiting their gravesite, looking at pictures, talking with someone about it, all sorts of things like that. And so there's two different kinds of continuing bonds that I've done research with. And the first is more internalized continuing bonds. And so this is when it's deliberate actions that we're doing, and they tend to be more comforting for the griever. So this would be talking about it or looking at photographs, like you're deliberately trying to maintain these connections with the deceased. And um, then there's these externalized continuing bonds, which are the things that you don't have basically connection, or you don't have control over. So they're more intrusive in nature. They tend to be more discomforting to them. So this could be waking experiences of the deceased that you have, where you maybe feel you see the deceased, you smell them, you feel their touch, or you hear them in waking life. And so that's really interesting to me. And I think they're distressing just because a lot of people don't understand that it's common to have these. And so it kind of, but they still line up in the sense of they are, like I said, they're not deliberate actions. They're having this. And I think, one would think dreams would fall into that, but, through the factor analysis, it didn't land up there. But dreams are also one of those things that really help with continuing bonds with people in their grief journey.
Mm. I can see how having a continuing bond would ease the grief process because I think sometimes it's like, oh, someone passed away, now they're just gone, and it's just like cold turkey, and that can be really painful. I can also see how having like a waking life during the day, continuing bond is going to help have dreams of that person if you are wanting to. So,
Yeah, and there is a connection just through the research that I've done of those who had more of those waking experiences were more likely to have more of these dreams of the deceased, which I think is interesting, and it could just be reflective of that, that continuity hypothesis that you're having those experiences and it's also lining up in your dreams. And what we found too is that when you look at these types of continuing bonds, different like personality styles and if it's grief or trauma determine the pathways in which people do grieve. So someone who, um, let's say, is not as traumatized from the loss and has less of an attachment avoidant personality will have more of these internalized continuing bonds, which is basically they're deliberately looking for comfort by, like thinking about the deceased. But when it comes to these externalized continuing bonds, it's more people who have an avoidant attachment style. So people who are not actively wanting to pursue these continuing bonds, just because that's their style of coping, they're going to avoid the pain. They're tending to be the ones to have more of these experiences, which I think is interesting. And then also people who are higher in trauma symptoms are having more of these experiences too. But what's interesting is within at least the first year or two after loss, both of them are associated with post-traumatic growth, when the experiences are comforting to them. So there's just two different paths of how people cope. And I think when we think about grief, we think people do it all the same way, but the different personality styles change the way people are willing to go to group support or not. Like someone with an avoidant attachment style isn't going to sign up for a group, a grief group.
Mm.
So it's like, how can we understand the differences and help all people through the grieving process?
Wow, that's really interesting. I'd never thought of it like that before, but I can see how that could be so helpful to know what kind of an attachment style you have and what kind of a personality you have, so then you can sort of help yourself through the process. So, for
Mhm.
someone who's listening now who's had a dream of someone that they've lost, what's the first thing that you'd encourage them to reflect on or feel into?
I think it depends what the dream is. I think it's hard to say because so many people have so many different types of dreams when it comes to this. I would just reflect on where you are in your grief and has that impacted you in any way, positive or negatively? Do you have any concerns of any of those experiences? I know a lot of these experiences can be very comforting to people. And just in our research, I think it was like over 80% of people, actually, of those who dreamt, it was like 92% had a very positive and comforting dream, and 44% had a negative dream. And so these positive dreams can be very uplifting and they can be really, I don't know, like there's something special. If you're religious or not, or spiritual or not, like it doesn't really matter. Like we found that that's not a big predictor in who's having these dreams. And so it's a human experience and it's very loving to people. And I think that's part of it. I think part of these experiences are to allow people to have a moment back in love and back in a presence of love where most of the time people know the individual's dead and yet here's love. Like the sadness and the distress isn't there like in waking life. And I think that's really interesting to me. And I think there's something about that within these dreams and why they are so powerful to people. Because I think love is, one of the strongest medicines that we actually do have. And these dreams are basically telling us that love still exists within our own sort of state of body. And so I think that's a huge thing. And I always like to sort of sit and witness people because I've heard so many people utilize those dreams throughout their life, like not only in the beginning of loss, but they'll go back to that dreams 20, 40 years later and still feel what that felt like, that beauty and that comfort, which I think is just fascinating. And I will say that it's not something that we expected when we did the research. Like I thought, based on the continuity hypothesis and based on the research that's out there, that most dreams people have are typically negative in general, just because of the stress people are constantly under, especially now with everything that's going on in the world. And then after trauma, dreams are more consistently negative. So grief is, in there. And so we would expect more people to have these negative dreams. But for whatever reason, when the deceased is a part of the imagery, people are having more comforting dreams and more positive dreams. And I think it goes against what we thought. And so they're acting differently. I think that's a beautiful and unique thing about these dreams, which is why I think people take them as out of this world or visitations at times because of that, because they are acting differently and people are feeling different in these dreams. They can be more vivid and more real than other dreams they've experienced before. But I do want to sort of also say, like, people are also having these negative dreams of the deceased, and that can be very challenging for them for multiple reasons. If a lot of times people will restrict their sleep because they don't want these dreams and they're afraid of having them. And then also with the negative dreams, some people that are spiritual will also think these dreams are visitations or hauntings. And so it challenges them on what the deceased is doing, and the interactions between them. So if it's a negative interaction that they're having, then they feel more guilt, more regret for something that maybe has happened in waking life. And so there's a lot of challenges in that. And so a lot of people can have a lot of questions in this area. And so going back to your original question, what to reflect on is I think just the feelings of the dream. And also, have you ever asked anyone around you about if they've had dreams? Because that is one of the common things most people, as you sort of mentioned, just don't ask about. And most people will have one of these experiences at some point in their journey with grief.
Mm. Wow, yeah, there's so much to that. I know what you're saying about like going back to that feeling of love and these dreams being positive. I often, whenever I'm sick, I have a dream of my deceased grandfather. And then, I get to hug him and he comforts me and I feel amazing. And then it's usually when I wake up, I'm on the mend and I'm not as sick as I was before. And I love it. I can always tap into that. And it's like I don't feel alone. And I can see how that's a really positive thing. And even now you just mention it and I can feel that feeling straight away again. So this, dreams are so healing in so many different ways. But I can also see like where the negative side of it comes in. And I think that if someone's had a dream and it is very negative and they're struggling with that after someone they've loved's passed away, it booking in with a dream therapist is a great idea because there can be interpretations. It can be that you've suppressed emotions and you're not actually feeling the emotions. So your dreams are forcing you to by giving you some strange imagery so that you
Yeah.
can release. And there's so many different layers to it, but it's still healing in a way. Like the bad dreams are actually still good dreams that are trying to help you. And
Yeah.
just because you've had one negative dream, it doesn't mean that they're all going to be that way. Dreams can transform and they shift and change as time goes along and as the seasons change. So I don't know if that's comforting for anyone listening, but
I
just
think it should be. Yeah, I think it's really good to understand if people are having negative dreams that um, before they go to some supernatural, it's always nice to sort of see, is this related to my grief and trauma? And a lot of times it is. And that's some of the things we're finding is just in the research too. And I find too, talking to people, a lot of times if they have guilt or if they're blaming themselves for something, they tend to have more of these negative experiences. Because you're right, there's a lot of clues within dreams to understand where we're at in the grieving process and what to maybe we need to talk about with a therapist or someone else when it comes to that because like as I've seen through just talking with people is that as you start working through some of those emotions, those negative dreams will actually become more positive and you'll have some of these more comforting dreams. And we see this in the research too, where most people who have a negative a dream will also have a positive one at some point too. So that's always really good. And I love that you have those dreams when you're sick. To help you heal. And I think it's one of the beautiful things about these dreams is that they don't stop when your grief is more manageable, let's say, is that they continue to happen at different points in our lives that we need support. So that could be if you're getting a divorce or something, or you're having difficulties with finances or the pandemic. I've seen a lot of dreams with that, where the deceased comes back and it's not really about your grief of the loss that they're not there. It's about your current grief in your waking life right now, which I think is really fascinating. And you see it again at end of life, where the deceased will basically reassure the individual that it's safe to die, that they're going to be there. And so it helps with the transition to dying. And so like this is just like it's really amazing just how these dreams transform. I will say because there's been a lot more press on these dreams at end of life, some people think that if they have a dream of the deceased, that they're going to die soon. And that's just the the lack of understanding that these dreams actually start when we're bereaved and then they happen also when we're dying.
that's a good one. My mum's been saying that because my granddad's been showing up. She's like, "Oh no, grandma must be going to die soon." And I'm like, "No." No. She's It's so funny. So
Yeah,
you
it's funny how rumors start, right? And like
yeah.
these ideas.
There's so many myths about dreams floating around on the internet. It drives me wild. So you mentioned the pandemic earlier. How do you think that the pandemic changed the way that we grieve and the way that we dream about people that we've lost? Did you see a big shift happen there?
Yeah, I don't know if it changed the way I didn't do the research in that, but on how it changed the way we dreamt. They said there's some people who are dreaming more of the deceased just being together and reassuring them like through the pandemic that things were going to be okay. So I guess that theme was a little different than usual and how they really enjoyed that based on the lockdowns and everything like that. But I think more importantly is that what the pandemic did was increase people's understanding of grief in general, and more people took it seriously. So there's a great need of increasing one's knowledge of grief literacy because of it where before the culture kind of downplayed the importance of it. And so I think that it's really changed our understanding of, what to expect when we're grieving and the support that we can get from either our workplaces or those around us. Just offering more compassion and basically how to sit with people who are grieving. There's so many resources now out there, which is so beautiful to see where the culture is like behind than from other cultures who more celebrate and acknowledge grief and have grief rituals where Western culture doesn't really have much, if anything. They kind of just said downplay the importance of it, and so a lot of people when they first go into grief or feel grief, they don't actually understand, like they don't know what's normal and what's not, and so if anything that they're feeling it can cause a lot of concern because they just understand what's going on in their bodies and their minds.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. 1,000%. You see like all these ceremonies and like huge goodbyes and massive family reunions and feasts and things like that in some cultures. And in ours, it can just be like, oh, you get 2 days off work and then everything returns back to normal. You kind of walking around like, what just happened?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So, in saying that, what do you wish that more therapists or support workers or carers understood about grief dreams, especially those who might not feel confident or equipped to talk about them with clients?
Well, I think it's just the importance of asking about them. And a lot of people have a hesitation towards them because A, they don't have the knowledge about them, like the research that's out there, but because there is more out there, I think there's enough for people to be able to understand the topic a little bit more. But just the importance of sitting with them. You don't need to interpret the dream. Like a lot of people think like, oh, I got to know what to say or how to look at this dream or tell them what it means. Like sometimes you can understand it based on where you are, but a lot of times you don't. And it's really just about offering a safe space for people to share what's going on in their grief journey just like these waking experiences. So many, let's say like um, in one of the studies I did within the last month, 50% of the people after partner loss had one of these waking experiences, and it was around 30 after pet loss. And so these are also very common, but no one talked about them. So people think they're more rare than they actually are. And same thing with these dreams. A lot of people are having these experiences. And so being able to provide a safe space for people to actually tell you what's going on without feeling judged is just so important in everyday life. And so as a therapist, or someone who's providing support, it's just good to know the research out there so you can provide a space and normalize the experience. And then if it is, there's concern or there's something going on, well, then you can always research a little bit more or send them to someone to get them greater support if that's not your area of interest. But overall, it's really just all about, understanding where the person's at and reducing any kind of distress that they may have because they're having these experiences and not understanding that they're normal.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's, I suppose, a lot of pressure on people thinking that if I share this, everyone's going to think I'm crazy. And
Yeah. Yeah.
people thinking that, oh, no one cares about dreams because they're not real, but they are real. They're extremely real experiences. And it feels good to share a dream. It feels good to talk about it because it was a real experience for you. Just like it feels good to talk about what happened in your day today. Like if you
Hmm.
had an extraordinary thing happen in your day, you'd want to share it. So why don't we want to listen about extraordinary things in dreams? I think that's changing now. And you're very right. Not all dreams are to be interpreted. Some of them are just to
Hmm.
be felt and experienced and remembered and linger, and create a bit of magic
Yeah.
in our lives. So, yeah, that's
Yeah. And
good.
I like just asking about them because I see it as just a different door into their world of grief. And usually it's a door they've never opened before. So a lot of times when I ask someone if they've ever had a dream of the deceased, they'll say yes and have this like emotional reaction and they say this is the first time I'm really talking about it. And I'm like, wow, like it's been like 20 years. And yet this emotion's coming out where you could ask them about, talk about your grief and nothing really, changes, but it's just because it's new and it's fresh and they get to experience it in a different way. And there's a lot of like, so like if I always love dreams because there's so much detail on like what they're wearing, where they are, what they're saying, and you can always ask about that and how it relates to waking life. Like you don't need to understand like the content, but it just provides you a different storyline on discussion. with them about their loss and who the person was to them in everyday life. So I always like sometimes the clothes has a lot of meaning or the location has a lot of meaning to them. It's like where they went all the time. And then, oh, well, tell me more about that. So you're using dreams as a way of just connecting to their grief and who the person was to them. And so sometimes it's not really about let's figure this dream out. It's just like let's just talk about this and then talk about more other aspects of your grief. Because that's, I think a lot of people just longing for that more than anything.
Mm.
Just because after the first couple months, people don't ask, and so they just don't share. And so this is just another opportunity for them to feel heard and listened to beyond the initial couple days after loss.
Mm, that's a great way to start a conversation with someone. I mean, sometimes you might be a friend or a family or a colleague or something to someone who is going through grief. And it's just like sometimes you can feel a bit frozen, like, I don't know what to say to them. Nothing I can say is going to make them feel better. You end up just saying, like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, and then being awkward. So this
Yeah.
is a great thing to be able to, yeah, bring up a conversation, open the door, let them know, like, I'm here and I want to listen and let them feel felt and heard. So that's really nice. And obviously, you and I are both very passionate about speaking about dreams, which is why we both have dream podcasts. And
Yeah.
you've created such a beautiful space with the Grief Dreams podcast. Do you have any stories of like a guest or a moment that's really stayed with you?
Yeah, there's been like a few, of course. I've had over 200, guests on there, which has been just a beautiful blessing. And so there's a couple. I'll share two of them that I find it's very powerful. One was I had an individual come on, Judy Hinderer, and she had a couple of these dreams of her father and her father comforting her in different ways, saying that, that he loves her and he sees her. And that's not unique. But what's unique is that he died when she was in womb, so she never actually got a chance to meet him. But through these dreams, she feels like she has a father. And like for me, I'm like, wow, like that's a different kind of moment than I had because I had a relationship with my dad. And she said before these dreams, she didn't feel she had a father. He was dead, right? And so these dreams allow her to connect to something that was, gone before. And I thought how beautiful that is and how powerful that is to feel that you have this father that's looking out for you. And then there's another one that came on a podcast. It was Serena Dyer, and she had her son or her stepson Mason died from a drug overdose, and she felt kind of guilty for it. Like she could have like done more, and that's kind of the kind of questions after drug-related death that people feel that they could have done something more. And so a lot of these dreams can be filled with like guilt or regret. Anyways, in the dream, it was very loving, and I'll share the dream with you. And so in the dream, Mason told me to hold his hands, and his energy was so joyful and funny. He then got very serious and told me that I needed to stop with the guilt. He told me that the guilt was soul-sabotaging and pointless. He then told me to be careful with the thoughts I was choosing and decisions I was making that were self-harming, because as he explained, the purpose of living is to love, and it must start with the self. He then laughed a little more and released my hands. And she said, when she woke up, her guilt was gone. I'm like you could go years in therapy and still have guilt, but like one dream can be like just so powerful that it can just change how one feels about oneself and also a direction of where to put your energy. And I really love how it said love, like to love yourself and like how difficult that actually truly is. Like, but it's a great goal to have. And I think a lot of these dreams really promote that, promote what love feels like when you are in a state of self-love, right? Like that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of these dreams can really not only help us through grieving, the grief process, but also be a beacon of where we could be in waking life all the time when we learn to love who we are. And I think that kind of helped with that. And so there's so much advice and beauty in these dreams that I also take, like, so it's not like when I ask about these dreams, it's just for them. I'm getting a lot too from hearing these stories and hearing how they respond to the individual's grieving process. But once again, they're powerful.
Mm. What a beautiful takeaway. I love dreams, love. I've heard so many dreams that end up being like, love yourself, love everyone around you, love is the answer, love fixes everything. I love it. They are beautiful, but they're so wise sometimes. And like what you're saying is, you can go to therapy for years and you can intellectually understand the concept of something. I need to love
Right.
myself more, right? But it doesn't really sink in sometimes. Like you can, yeah, I get it, I'm trying, and you just can't shift something. And then there can be a dream like that you've just described, and you're feeling it, like you feel
Yeah.
it, and then you just wake up different.
Yeah, you almost like know it's real in a way, and you know what you're I always say like if you can have it in a dream, that feeling, why can't you have it in waking life? It's possible, right?
Mm.
And so it's almost like learning about ice cream and tasting ice cream, right? Like you can learn about all you want, but the moment you taste it, you're like, oh, this is this is what it's
Yeah.
about. And the same thing with that. And I think it gives people a lot of hope. And you see it across culture, like even though these dreams may be different based on one's religious beliefs and understanding and culture, the main theme that's the same is that the people are feeling this kind of love. And what that does just consciously when we wake up, but also I think the healing benefits that it has for the body and regulating oneself and healing, I think is more than we understand. And like we still need to do more research to understand that and be able to catch some of these dreams in action to understand what's going on in the body, which would be, fascinating for me. And like, but at the end of the day, it's like, but love is seems to be one of the main things that's going on for people that probably is providing a lot of change. And I know that dream with my father, as much as I expressed my love for him, it was also there was love in the imagery. Like just remember I was walking through it and feeling the dream. The dream was very peaceful. And most dreams I can't say have that kind of feeling in it. It was something different. And I always wonder, did that also was that part of the change? Not more of just releasing some of the blocks of me saying I love him, which I didn't get a chance to do before he died, and saying goodbye. I didn't get a chance to do because it was sudden. Like I know those were blocks, and I got to release those through the imagery. But the feeling of love, how powerful was that, and meaningful was that for me to also have that transformation? I don't know, but I feel that it's probably part of the key to why they change people so much.
Mm. Yep, there's a big theme in my dreams of love, and for the past decade, that's what they've been teaching me to love myself and
Mm.
seeing things from different perspectives. And it's all about self-growth, and they'll come in and tell me these things I shouldn't do and what I should do. And it's been like this. Oh, okay, yes, dreams. But
That's
yeah.
beautiful. I think that's awesome that you also have that kind of similar theme within your life and you see it within your journey and also how hard it is. Like a lot of people think it's like just like it's easy. It's not, and it's a process, but you get better as you move forward and I think pay attention. And dreams have been very helpful to me too, beyond just the dream to the deceased, to understand that and to understand my own emotions, which has been, its own journey to increase my emotional intelligence, which you don't get trained on. And so there's so many things that dreams provide that really do help you along the way to just become a better person and to see yourself in a different way, which we need. We absolutely need that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's people that do like self-growth and all this work and stuff, and they're all like one day at a time. But we can have one day at a time and one dream at a time and like double our time of working on ourselves. Therefore, getting better faster. So, yeah. It
It's
definitely.
true. And it's totally true that, for those who do remember their dreams, it is something that's, can be very special. And I will say, just I don't know where we are in the interview, but I will say that one of the things that questions that were asked a lot was like, why am I not having these dreams of the deceased? Because people put a lot of pressure on themselves. And then it goes to, oh, maybe it's something wrong with me, right? Maybe I did something, and that goes to like the lack of self-love. But what we found is dream recall frequency in general. So people who are dreaming just about other things more in general, we'll have more of these dreams of the deceased. And so that's interesting. And then when people now ask me, like, why haven't I dreamt of the deceased? I always ask them about the recall, and the recall is usually non-existent or very low. And I said, well, the odds of you catching that is pretty low. And that's sort of what it is, or that could be a possibility of, what's causing that. And also, one of the other big things is, do they even want to dream? Some people are still, I would say, in a state of denial or avoidance, because one of the things I've seen for a couple people is that they don't want to dream because then it would make it too real. And I said, oh, like maybe when you're ready, like if you're ready to make it more real, it'll come or you'll remember one. And some of the people did, like once they decided to go to the gravesite for the first time after like 20 years, they had a dream soon after of the deceased. And so it's just very interesting to sort of look at that sort of stuff. But be kind to yourself if you're not having one. And that's why I say like it's always great to ask other people because you can utilize their dreams if you are spiritual to know that they've crossed over or whatever that is. But also just to be able to gain some guidance or understanding through some of their dreams too for your own self.
Yeah, you're so right. And this is something that I've been working on for a while now. Because you can learn to remember more dreams. It's not something that is just, oh, that person's lucky and I'm unlucky. There's things that you can put in place to start to remember more dreams. And I train people how to do that. And I've written a free ebook on how to remember more dreams and why you should care. Because as you just
Mm,
explained, Joshua, it's like the belief and being ready and understanding why you want a dream versus if you actually really don't want one, then they're not going to come because understanding why they're so powerful and how they can help you will help you to remember more dreams. It's like you tell yourself, I don't want to hear
yeah.
about it. You won't hear about it. Okay, I'm ready to hear about it. Then they'll start coming through. But if you're hearing this and you're like, oh yeah, I really want to remember more dreams, go to dreamhub.au and there's a tab that says ebook. And you can just download that and it's free. And you can start to train yourself to start to remember more dreams. And it works. Trust me, it works.
That's
Give it
yeah.
a go.
I saw the research on it. It does work, and I think it's beautiful that it's not fixed. Like your dream recall rate isn't fixed. But I also mentioned too, if people are in a state of grief, that yeah, they may catch a dream of the deceased. That's comforting. But there's also a high probability that a lot of the dreams that they're going to be having are going to be negative in nature, that the deceased isn't present. Just because that what we would expect if you're in deep grief, that a lot of your dreams without the deceased would, be more uh, difficult to process when you're awake. And it's just, I think, understanding, dreams in general is very helpful too. Not just like I'm trying to get a dream of the deceased. That's comforting because you may get a dream of the deceased that's negative, and then now you're even more worried or whatever. So I think it's important if you do decide to do that to also have the support necessary to understand the negative dreams that will probably happen in that time to give you some understanding on how to sort of understand your own dream language.
Very good point. And I see that's why you should check out the IASD conference so you can learn a lot more about dreams and have some tools in your tool belt. So, Josh, for anyone who's never heard of IASD but is curious about dreams, why do you think that this year's online conference might be a great place for them to start?
Well, we talked about it's cheaper to
Yeah.
attend. But I think it's just, if you haven't heard of it, it's just a great place to know that dream research exists and there's a community of people who value dreams. And so if that's something that you're starting to be interested in, it's a great place to understand some of the research that's going on around the world and maybe even make connections with people. Because I know anyone there that has someone new that says, "Oh, I want to learn more about dreams. I don't know about this or that." Like a lot of people give guidance on how they sort of process their own dreams and their pathway towards it, and they won't look down upon you for wanting to know more about dreams. Where I think in the culture, if you say that you want to learn more about dreams, they may, put you down or not take you very seriously, or say, "Oh, that's not that you shouldn't do that." And I know I had that before I started. A lot of people, just like I said, didn't value dreams, and so they didn't think it was important that I should either. But it's like once you realize something, or you have an intuition that it means something or it might mean something, and you're intrigued and or could work with your practice or your clients, it's going to be a great spot to be able to learn more and make connections and networks that will be helpful in your future.
Yeah, I agree. Joshua, thank you so much. I know that a lot of people listening are going to walk away from this feeling a little more seen and a little more understood. As you know, it's not always easy to talk about grief, but dreams do have this beautiful way of helping us open the door gently and often when we least expect it. Before we finish today, is there anything that you'd like to share with our listeners or anywhere you'd like to send them to explore more of your work?
Yes, they could visit my website, griefdreams.ca. And then I said, the Grief Dreams podcast is a great place to just learn more about what kind of dreams people are having and how it applies to their grief journey. And I think that's part of the conversation I'm really trying to get apart is not just that what the dream is that someone's having, but how does it play in their grief journey and how does it impact that positively or negatively? And then also I'm on Instagram at Grief Dreams.
Beautiful. Thank you again. It's been a real pleasure having you on. And to everyone tuning in, if this conversation resonated with you, or if you're curious about what becomes possible when we really start paying attention to our dreams, come join us at the IASD 2025 online conference. It's where dreamers, scientists, therapists, artists, and everyday people from around the world come together to share, learn, and connect. Joshua will be speaking, I'll be there too, and you're invited. So head to asdreams.org to check out the program and register. Early bird tickets are open now, so it's the perfect time. And if you'd like to explore more of Joshua's work, visit griefdreams.ca and tune into the Grief Dreams podcast. It's full of really honest, really moving, and deeply human conversations. So thank you for listening. And as always, sleep well and dream deep. Thank you, Josh.